The official, and Paul will start the recording, Kofa. I didn't know if you knew that, but we do record our sessions.
Yeah.
Okay, so warm welcome to everyone again who's attending our Thursday travels to country offices. Today we are visiting Hanoi, Vietnam, and our champion, Akofa Wallace, is here to tell us all about what life is like in Hanoi. And as you know, our Thursday travels are something that many people have provided feedback of how fun and enjoyable it is. And it's also informative. And like today, we have Barbara, who used to live there and now is on hopefully a journey of nostalgia, right? And
Yes.
fond memories. And it also supports, actually, more importantly, WBG's decentralization agenda, because you get a slice of what life is like. You get to meet people who you will meet when you move there. If you're going to Hanoi, Akofa is there to welcome you. We have Barbara who can tell us what it was like to have lived there. So it gives you sort of what we call the inside track. So what we will do today is that Akoma and I will have an informal discussion, mostly her telling us about what life is like. If you have a question, please, this is informal, unmute yourself, or you can put your questions in the chat box, and I will keep an eye on the chat box and read out your questions for Akoma to answer. So now I will hand to Akopa. You will introduce herself, tell us a little bit about Hanoi and today because of COVID before moving on to what's like to live there. So Akopa.
Thank you so much, Yvonne. Thank you for the invitation. It's an honor to be on today. Yes, so as Yvonne says, my name is Akofa. I'm British Ghanaian, current trading spouse of Kyle Kelhofer, who's the head of mission for the IFC in Vietnam, Cambodia, and Laos. We came more than 5 years ago now. We've just marked our 5th year in August, August 16th. And we came with 2 kids in tow. We've got rid of one. Our oldest is now in UBC in Vancouver, Canada, in her 3rd year of university. And our youngest is in grade 12 at the United Nations International School of Hanoi. My background is public relations and communications. I've been lucky enough to always have worked in some guise or the other. I'm currently, full disclosure, I'm currently the communications manager at the United Nations International School of Hanoi, where I lead the communications team there. And we absolutely love our life in Hanoi. Moving on to what it's like in Hanoi. Right now, we're very lucky with COVID. As most of you may know, Southeast Asia has already experienced SARS in 2002, so they had previous experience of managing pandemics such as this. So when WHO started alerting the international community back in mid-January, Vietnam authorities were hot off the mark. And so from 23rd of January, they were already quarantining all flights from China. Not only did they do that, they actually did round up most Chinese nationals in every hostel and hotel and get them quarantined and tested. So they were very, very hot off the mark. They didn't wait for WHO to announce it was a pandemic. They just got on with it. And I think that's where we lucked out. Around that time was what we call Tet, which is the Vietnamese New Year. The Chinese call it, obviously, the Chinese New Year. We call it Tet. And typically that's a period of travel for those who know this region. And certainly as the communications manager at UNIS, we started our crisis communications around that time. So actually after the tech break, we never returned to school. So schools remained shut. Everything else was open, but schools around Vietnam remained shut for a total of 13 to 14 weeks. And I think that helped because that naturally made other people stay at home. And we had 17 cases, and then there was no cases and no deaths for a long period of time until a Vietnamese national returned from her trip in France and the UK and caused somewhat of a supposed outbreak. And then we went into lockdown for maybe 2 weeks, but then we've been out ever since. So it's been very well managed. We didn't have any deaths until August, and that's because there was a slight outbreak, what we consider an outbreak here of maybe 10, 15 cases in a hospital. Yeah, in a hospital full of very sick people, cancer patients, renal dialysis patients, and we lost people then. So I think our first death to COVID was in August in this country.
Wow.
Yeah.
It really shows, right? Public health and public management of and closing and making sure to deal with the sources. So I assume now school is open, your school is open, and you're back face to face?
Yeah, so we returned actually in May, the beginning of May, back to face, and schools like the United Nations International School, we invested heavily in screening equipment. So every single one of us is temperature screened. We wear masks, although this week we no longer wear masks in class, but we wear masks to and from class and in crowded areas, like the canteen. Well, the canteen, we have plexi guards so that they sit in these sort of cubicle areas now while they eat. So because obviously they can't wear masks and eat. And we try and do a bubble system, but effectively, life is normal for us.
Great.
Very, very
just to let you know, if you suddenly see very faces, it's because to improve the quality of the streaming.
Thank you.
That's why everybody has to turn off their cameras.
Thank you.
But anyway, so then to pivot, I mean, you've been there 5 years. So, what is life like, a realistic picture of what life is like in Vietnam, in Hanoi, should I say, not Vietnam, for WBG families?
I believe life is very good. We came from Bangladesh, so quite a different environment to come into. First of all, life is exceptionally safe here, especially as a capital city. There's much we take for granted here. But there is a lot to do. It's a good family posting, I believe. There are good schools. They're expensive, but they're good. There's a bustling expat community, but also a great Vietnamese community that you can easily integrate with. The Vietnamese are exceptionally friendly, very welcoming. And there's a lot to do here, I believe. There's lots of art, there's music, there's culture, there are, great places to eat. So yeah, it's what we find is that most people don't want to leave. That's why we may still be here. It's a very lovely, welcoming place to be. There's no hardship in my mind.
So when you say there are lots of places to visit, could you give some examples or ideas if someone was living there or visiting? What would you suggest they did?
Yeah, well, I mean, as a family, I mean, one of the great parts of living in Southeast Asia in particular is that it's very cheap and easy and convenient to travel. So actually also just to mention that because we have COVID under control, we're able to travel domestically. So they've closed the borders off, but we are able to travel domestically. So and there's, Vietnam is a tourist destination, right? So you've got Halong Bay, you've got Con Dao, the Lat, obviously Ho Chi Minh City, you've got the islands, great beaches in Hoi An, and just, I mean, an immense amount of things to do. Last weekend, we were up in the mountains for our midterm break in a beautiful mountainside called Yên Tu. And then we went up 2 cable cars up to the top of the peak, and there are lots of pagodas there, just stunning views, you know, great air up there, and it's only 2.5-hour drive from Vietnam. And anybody who is a running enthusiast, Vietnam is definitely the place to be. The British ambassador and his wife just recently did the Phu Long trail marathon. There are lots of mountain trails, and if you fancy 42 kilometers, and hey, come to Vietnam, you could do that. I don't. There are cycling trails. I mean, you could. So if you're into fitness, even with the bad AQI, people are getting out there all the time. Today, I was invited by a friend to go to Sapa, which is in the mountainside, for a yoga retreat. And those are regular, you know, invitations that we have. There's always something going on in Vietnam. And so yeah.
And not to mention, the silk's still very cheap.
Mm-hmm.
That's what we used to do, is go to Hanoi to buy silk.
Yeah, the fabric.
Silk cones.
Yeah, you can get things tailored. I mean, it's just a wonderful place to be, honestly.
Good. I mean, I visited Hanoi and love it, so you don't have to convince me. I have a question here, saying, I'm curious about the language.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't know Vietnamese, how do you operate?
Well, my first advice to anyone who wants to move to Vietnam is learn the language. Really, really make the effort. When I arrived, I did one-to-one classes for 5 months. And so I would class myself as an advanced beginner intermediate. I can speak with the prime minister enough to have some sort of a conversation with people. And it really helps. And it helps for a number of reasons. The Vietnamese are very proud of their culture and their language and their country. So there is a preference for their own language. Also, if you bear in mind that their links traditionally and historically have been with Russia and German, the Eastern Bloc, so they know German. You know, a few generations ago, they would have learnt Russian in school. So one of my best friends learnt Russian. She didn't learn English. And I remember meeting a teacher who was at UNIS 35 years ago. And he said back in those days when UNIS actually started, he had to teach himself English in secret because it was against the rules to learn the enemy's language. So you've got to bear in mind that it's only the last maybe 2 generations at a push that can speak English. So really try and learn the Vietnamese language because it makes your life a lot easier. The Vietnamese really appreciate seeing foreigners make that effort. But as I saw, I think Georgina just posted, it's difficult. Yes, it's very, very difficult. It's a tonal language. And so you have things like, there's a word called, there's ban, ban, can mean ban, 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 ban. That could mean table, that could mean busy, that could mean friend. and that could mean to buy. So so you have to be very careful how you pitch it each time. Otherwise you're changing the meaning and they won't understand what you're saying. So yes, it's very difficult, but it's not impossible. So please do try and make the effort if you come. And it's also just beautiful to learn because you learn about the people while you're learning the language. So they really respect age. So like in the Western world, we say, how are you? What's your name? That's what's important to us, right? We meet somebody, we say, what's your name? So we know how to address the person. In Vietnam, they will say, they will ask you, how old are you? They want to know bao nhiêu tuổi, what's your age? Because they want to know how whether to address you as chi or m, or ka or ba. So that's their way of showing respect. So if I have a friendly relationship with somebody, I would say chi because my older sister. So I call my housekeeper Chi. She's older than me. She will also call me Chi because out of respect for what she considers to be my position, but I always like to be called M. And so that's how we roll. So it teaches you a little bit of something about the culture and where we put value in. So please try and learn the language. There's some good teachers around.
Fascinating. It's a bit like Chinese as well. So, well, the older the better. We all should be going there as we progress in life. And anyway, to change the conversation slightly, I have another question. Can you say something about air quality in Hanoi and level of air pollution?
Unfortunately, it is getting bad these days, although the government are aware of it and are trying to improve upon it. It is a concern to many of us living here. So what you'll find, air quality, like machines around the place. So, for example, at the school, we have an AQI reading. So UNIS does, so even now you can go on the UNIS website and you can see the AQI reading. And so what we do for our community is that once it reaches a particular level, the children are not allowed out. And the US Embassy also track the AQI. And so it's like checking the weather for us. We check the AQI at the same time to advise us on, whether to go in or out. And it's seasonal as well. So it's not constant. You have your good days, you've got good seasons, bad seasons. But they're trying to work on it. Yeah.
Is that one of the reasons why a lot of families go for weekends out of town? Because presumably, if you go out, does the air pollution improve, like at the beach or
I
up
should
the
imagine
mountains?
so, but also just because Vietnam is beautiful and why not? So even when we arrived here, AQI was never something that was a talking point as it is, or it has been in the last 2 years. But people still travel because, it's $50 to go to Ho Chi Minh City, and it's beautiful to get to the beach for the weekend. So hey, that's why they do it. But yeah, it does help.
Yep.
It was nice to be in the mountainside last weekend.
I have a question here about connections. Is the WBGFN chapter in touch with other international organizations and chapters?
Not that I know of. So just to give you a little brief of my knowledge of WBFN, I think I did see someone bring Melody's name up in the chat. So Melody was our champion here, but she relocated in the summer, and she was doing a great job at trying to get us all together. There is a lot going on in Vietnam, more so than in other places. So it tends to be we probably need to do better at getting ourselves together more often.
In the old days, there was a spouse, a male spouse who led the football club, the Hanoi football. What happened? Has the football team disintegrated?
I have no idea. I will, but there are a lot of associations. I belong to many myself. A Hanoi International Women's Club still active, and I was a part of that for a couple of years. And that's a great place to find out and learn so much about the brilliant people in Vietnam. They've got some great programs for HIV and AIDS being led by phenomenal Vietnamese women, for example. They've got programs for sex workers here. They're doing work that you'd have no idea that they were doing, and it's just mind-blowing. So get involved with those kind of organizations. There's a lot, and it'd be great to rejig the network here.
Some more questions. They're coming fast and furious. What is the working language, which is great actually, What
Yeah,
is the working language in the WBG offices? The second question is, how secure is Vietnam generally?
very secure. So English is the language spoken in the Vietnamese, in the World Bank Group. Everybody speaks English. Um, but feel free to learn Vietnamese. The Vietnamese staff will appreciate you for it.
And security, you said
Oh
earlier it
yeah,
was very safe, right?
very, very safe. We've not had a burglary. I mean, we're lucky we do have security guards, but you know, we don't have a burglary. I don't worry going out at night. Our daughter was working in a pub when she was here last summer, and she was cycling home, and we were, you know, at midnight, and we were fine with her doing that, and that was 2 miles away.
So, and then do you drive in Vietnam or do you use a motorbike?
I'm lucky. We have a car and a driver. And so I don't drive and I choose not to have a motorbike because I know my strengths and weaknesses, and driving a moped is not for me. Although feel free to do it. You are supposed to be licensed. And so I think the office can help people get that. Yeah.
Okay, and then the question is curious what the level is to ban going out. Is 552 in Delhi today? Says Beverly.
Oh, for AQI?
Sorry, I missed out AQI. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. Oh, wow. That's so bad in Delhi. I read something about Delhi's situation. We're not that bad. Hopefully, won't be that bad yet. Typically, it's around 150. It could be lower. We've had, you know, during COVID was good for us. We went down to 15, which was amazing. Um, to be honest, I don't make too much of a habit of checking every day. I think there's enough to get crazy about. So. But the rule here is when it's 300, certainly kids aren't supposed to go to school, and it hasn't reached 300 in a long time.
Oh, good. Now, talking about
Thanks.
schooling, this is your expertise. So, what
Mm-hmm.
advice do
Yep.
you have about schooling? Because you must know that at the inside of your hand.
Yes, I do. So UNIS is the third international school I've worked in. I worked in Bangladesh and Ghana as well. UNIS is an IB school. From discovery, so that's age 3 right up to grade 12, which is 17, 18-year-olds. And so we're IB all the way through. We're the first properly established international school in Vietnam. Started as a project with the UNDP, and that's where our association with the UN began. There are other schools, obviously, but Concordia, they offer an American education, AP. We have British International School offering IGCSEs and A levels, and they've started IB for grade 11 and grade 12. We have a French school that does the French system in its entirety. And those are the main schools that you will find people are picking on. So my advice always to people looking at schools is certainly depends on the age of your child. Pick the right fit for your child. You know, that's I speak as someone in education and as a mother. Pick the right fit for your child. But then when the child is in the middle years, maybe around grade 6, grade 7, start thinking about where they're heading in the future. And then that should determine which school you put them in the first instance. If you love Concordia, it's a beautiful school, but you're not looking to go to the States, may not be the right thing to put your child in an AP school, because then they may have to do different extra exams to get to the UK, for example. So just things like that. So there are different schools, very good schools. And so we're very lucky in that sense. Obviously, I love UNIS. Apply early to all the schools. These schools are very, very popular. get that application in. The window for UNIS opens from January, but they do a rolling application. But then that we will have an idea of what seats are available for the following year in the January to February window. So get your applications in, even if you don't know, if you hadn't confirmed, because you don't want a situation whereby you know you're coming, and then they say in May, "Oh, sorry, we're full," because we do have a wait list. The good news for us as WBG is that we do have priority because we are UN affiliated and we're diplomats. So you can press and push. You know, work with Hian in the IFC HR manager. She's fantastic. Work with, the World Bank HR. We've got connections. We know people. Put your application in first as soon as possible and worry about the rest later.
And two other questions. One is still connected to schools. Are local Vietnamese children also allowed into the international school?
Yes.
And the other one is on work permit. In general, can spouses easily obtain a work permit in Vietnam?
Okay. So in terms of Vietnamese people, yes. I mean, if anybody knows anything about the development of Vietnam, you will know that they're doing exceptionally well. One of the few countries with, optimistic figures this year in particular, which means that the Vietnamese businesses, we have very wealthy Vietnamese people here. So at UNIS, for example, because we're a UN school and we value diversity, we don't allow more than 20% of any nationality. I can tell you now that Vietnamese occupy 17% of our total numbers. And totally up to caps or over caps in certain grades. And it'll be the same again in Concordia. So other schools other than UNIS don't have those strict boundaries. We just do because we are a UN school and we want that diversity. Other schools you will find they're heavily Vietnamese and Korean. There's a huge Korean contingent here with Samsung and various other companies like that. And they're long-termers. And they also occupy 17 to 20% of our numbers. And you'll find that the same in most schools, heavy with Korean and Vietnamese.
What about the work permit situation?
The work permit, so how it works, and I've double checked with the HR manager IFC today for today's meeting. Now, we have an agreement with the government that World Bank Group spouses are allowed to work on a temporary or contractual basis. However, if you decide to work for a private company, they need to check, they need to give you a visa. So, so it is possible, but it is difficult, I have to admit. And that's why for me it helps to work at United Nations International School because we're the same family.
So presumably, like for the units that you teach, or you communications manager, or say a counselor, you would go under the temporary contractual arrangement for work permit, or are you exempt?
Yeah, well, no. So we're no longer exempt, I believe. We think we were for a time. So right now, for example, so what UNIS does with all teachers and expat hires, local or overseas, is we're on 2-year rolling contracts.
Mm-hmm.
So your work permit would typically be for that period of time, organized by the school.
Oh, and for WBG spouses, it doesn't involve giving up anything, right? Because in some countries you have to give up your diplomatic status and all kinds of things.
Yeah, I mean,
that's great.
Yeah, well, you'd have to speak to speak to them. So it's on offer. But I certainly have had my conversations, and so I don't want to talk about my own personal situation. But I am working, and it is possible. So just always, it is in your best interest to double check, because they change the rules all the time as well. So what I say today may not stand in 6 months. So the government does change its mind. So this is my third place of work. I've worked for the Fauna and Flora International. I had worked for UNIS, left there, worked for a private software development company here, offshore company, as their director of marketing for a couple of years, and then I returned to UNIS back in January. So I've always checked in and made sure my papers were correct. So it does change. Yeah.
But can I ask you, does the fact that you speak Vietnamese well have helped you in this ability to roll from positions?
No.
No.
So
Okay.
advice to anybody. You guys are all spouses, so I think you probably know this better than me. You know that you have to hustle a little bit, and you have to be creative with the skill set that you come with. I'm lucky that I'm a strong copywriter. And so whenever we go to a new place, I pitch myself as a strong copywriter in the first instance and a content marketer. And I topped up my certification last year with a digital diploma in digital marketing, because that's where, the specialism is. So I have specific skills that I am that are sought after. It helps me know Vietnamese because my team, people working for me, is Vietnamese. And if I've got people in my last place of work, I was working in a software company. I was the only expat woman in 300 with 300 people. And I had a direct report of 9, and they're all Vietnamese. If I need to know what conversations are going around me, so that's just me being smart. Because you can catch when people are, misbehaving or not doing it, because I can hear the language. So it helps in that sense. Learn the language, then you can be a lot more effective.
So generally speaking, I mean, I hear you. You're saying you need to hustle, you need to be proactive. You also need to have curated your skill set so that you can actually have something to offer to the market.
Yeah.
But generally speaking, is that employment? Does everybody have to not follow that, but be like that in order to succeed? Because it's not going to come to you.
Yeah, I think so. I've worked with a lot of women, supported a lot of spouses, not just from World Bank, but other organizations, women with master's degrees, PhDs, desperate to work and struggling to do it. So you've got to remember that Vietnam is Vietnam first. So
yes.
So also some companies have quotas in the numbers. So the private company I was working for has a specific quota of international people they are allowed to hire. And then there are specific roles that you cannot appoint a foreigner for. So for example, in the past, I've consulted for British Council in Ghana and Bangladesh, various places like that. There was this brilliant job for British Council in Vietnam. They were, I don't want to use the word force, but they had to hire a Vietnamese person for that position. So you have you have heavy restrictions on who people are allowed to appoint. And so what they do is then with me, because English is my expertise and they need it for content marketing, it's an international market, they can then say, well, we had to hire a foreigner in this particular position because we needed English as a strong skill set. But the Labour Ministry's preference is that you find a Vietnamese person who speaks English. So that is a real challenge, and the more that the Vietnamese are getting trained, obviously, which is brilliant, going out there. Some of them are coming from Singapore. They've gone to the UK. They've gone to the US, Sweden, and they're coming and they're thankfully taking these positions. It means less and less opportunities for foreigners.
What about self-employment? I have a question here about self-employment.
Yeah, I think you can. I'd be entrepreneurial. In my next life, I may set up a website-based business because I've learnt the skill set, and why not? And it gives you freedom. And there is a lot of opportunity. You've got to be creative. Vietnam is a great place. I meet foreigners all the time. There's some who've been here 15 years. They've opened businesses. They've learnt the language. They've learned how to do business here. My last boss was Swedish. Came here 10 years, 13 years ago, I think now, to set up an arm of the Swedish company he was working for. Realized that there was this country with fantastic software development opportunities. Got rid of his contract with his bosses in Sweden, set up his own setup here, now has 300 plus software developers working for him. We were working for Electrolux. We were working for other major companies with offices in Ho Chi Minh City, Sweden, Australia, the US, all over. That's what you can do in Vietnam. People have opened restaurants, click space, cafes, a lot of different things, tourist businesses. If you're willing to do business here and go through the process, hey, go for it.
So just one question. I mean, I hear you loud and clear that it's really the entrepreneur's playground because there's great opportunity, but the economic climate's healthy and stuff. But the question is, for WBG spouses, does that change the category of work permit you will apply for then?
I think it depends. I wouldn't know because I haven't investigated enough. Yeah. I certainly am not restricted, but that could be because my husband's head of mission. It could be in my favor. I honestly wouldn't know.
Okay, so they should take advice then.
Always take advice because things change and different. So and also there's the specialism changes. If you're working in finance, it may be so completely different to what I've been involved in. Sure. So always just check in with the office. They're helpful. They get yeah.
So another question here, how are same-sex spouses accepted in Hanoi?
Very well.
And are there issues for same-sex partners or couples with work permits and visas?
Not that I know of. Our new secondary school principal at UNIS is in a same-sex relationship, and he's here with his partner. The previous US Ambassador Ted Osius and Clayton Bond were here. We have Pride events going on all the time here every year. It's the LGBTQ plus community is very present here. In my last workplace, and Vietnamese people I had in my team, somebody who identified as transgender, someone who identified as lesbian, in open relationships, no problems.
Okay. So do you get a better salary, I assume, or better prices in the market because you speak the language?
Yes, definitely. Definitely, 100%. Then they start quoting dollars to you at first, and you're like, cheese Hanoi, and then like, oh, okay, and then the price goes down, which basically means no, I live in Hanoi, and then they're like, oh, okay, and then then they start talking to you, and it's all very friendly. So yes.
You don't get a bonus for being a clever foreigner speaking
Well,
Vietnamese.
actually, what's fantastic is that then you get to make lots of friends. So it was so
Yeah,
sweet.
yeah.
The other week, the team in the office decided to give me it was my birthday. They gave me a new ao dai. I own about 10 ao dais, by the way, which is the traditional Vietnamese dress. They got me a new one, but it wasn't quite the right fit. So I went to the tailor who knows me by now because I have so many, and he doesn't speak a word of English. And there was, other customers of his in there, and then they start talking to me, realizing I could speak Vietnamese. We had a blast. They kind of adopted me. We took pictures, and they were trying to advise me on how to refit it. It was so much fun. And then you learn so much. They tend to love braids, and they wanted to cook for me, and a whole lot. You make friends that way in the most random situations.
Right. And then the next question here is, what about volunteering opportunities in Hanoi?
There are loads of those. Please join Hanoi International Women's Group. And that's not just for women, by the way, it's for men. It's just the name of the group at the beginning. So please, men, also join in. It's a fantastic organization. I was part of it for a year on the board as the communications manager at the time. Had the best time of my life. Like I said, I met so many phenomenal people. We have a section. What we do is we fundraise as part of it. We organize events and different things like that. But we used to do a big annual bazaar and raise money for the benefit of women's and children's charities. And there are some great things going on. And school on the boat, HIV/AIDS programs, working with sex workers, working with Blue Dragon, who save children from the streets, and child brides who've been kidnapped from Vietnamese border villages and off to China. You get to work with all of them. It's really fascinating. You'll meet the most amazing people you've ever met. So please do volunteer.
Sounds actually fascinating.
Yeah,
But I mean, the work, the work that they do. So now to something much more mundane. If you will speak but important, which is housing.
yes.
What advice do you have about for families, or families looking for housing? What's your sort of 101 for Hanoi?
Okay, so what tends to happen, so we live in a beautiful neighborhood called Teho, which is part suburban, but kind of vibey as well. Lots of restaurants and things going on around here, lots of, life here. And it's part expat, part Vietnamese. Our neighbors are both Vietnamese and expat. But a lot of people also live in places called Sipucha, which is where the school is. So the school is in this estate. And what's nice is that if you've got small children, look at Sapucha, because they get to ride their bike to school and park it up. They get to be on their little scooters or roller skate. And I think that's quite sweet. That little suburban life that they can get while here. Just be careful with the houses. We have this glorious house that, I always say to Kyle, I'm going to miss this house so much because, it's 4 stories and I'm never going to live in a palace like this again. But it does come with maintenance issues. It does get exceptionally cold at winter, feels colder more indoors than outdoors. There's some plumbing issues. Watch your electricity bill. If it goes too high, someone's probably rerouting and you're probably servicing another house. So if you get like 9 million dong as your monthly bill, there's something wrong. Check it out. Those kind of things can happen. So just make sure you have a very good landlord, because when there's leakages or humidity problems, you need them to come and fix it. And we're very lucky that we've got good people who are very prompt. But I have heard horror stories A Swedish friend of mine living in Supucha moved because there was a problem in one house, moved her 4 small kids and her husband to another house, and they've got humidity problems, and you don't want your child coughing and having respiratory problems. And then do you move again? And there's lots of construction. So some people move to get away from construction only to find that next day there's construction right next door. So just take your time, you know. Service departments, perfect for couples, you know, easy, breezy, everything is there. Some are furnished, usually part or full furnished. I did ask the HR manager if you guys were interested in coming, what would they expect now? We do have a company called Metrica, a relocation company, and they will help you with all of this. But if your gut is telling you something not quite right, ask more questions. It's okay. Just lots of options. It took us a long time to find this house. We saw a lot of houses.
Okay. So I guess there are a wide variety of areas too, right, to choose from what you've said.
Yeah, and it also depends on the experience that you want. I mean, you could go to Old Quarter, beautiful, and it's close to the office, but far from the schools. So it depends on what your priority is. Where we are, we chose it because, you know, it was, you know, at the time, a 15-minute drive for Kyle to go to the office in one direction, 15-minute drive for the kids to get to school in the other direction. So we were somewhere in the middle. So no one had to really struggle.
And what's the traffic situation like?
Well, it's getting worse. So the interesting thing about Vietnam is that the good news is that it's rapidly developing. You know, the bad news is that with rapid development comes high rises and lots more traffic. So something to be mindful of, but not the worst that we've seen. So,
and I just want to butt in. Like when I was there, it's the opposite. So anyway, just to give you an idea, we were the pioneers of the WBFN office there. So, so I'm the opposite of you. I was the, you know, the regular person, the regular expat. So I can tell you later, you know, what that was about. So just ask me.
Yeah, when we arrived 5 years ago, people had warned us that traffic was bad. And then we arrived here and we thought, what traffic? Having lived in Bangladesh.
It's all relative. It's all relative. Depends on where you were before. Yeah, definitely. So we have a few more questions, I think, to go. I mean, so far, really, it's one of those locations where you sort of feel, after what you've said, is that what's there not to like?
I know, yeah.
I am going to ask you though, are there any unique challenges? You know, so far, I mean, it sounds like an easy place with everything going for it, but just to ask the flip side of the coin, are there any unique challenges relocating families need to be aware of?
Yeah, the noise. It's bustling. So be mindful of the noise, especially with construction going on, you know, every turn. So that can be hard to manage sometimes, and they don't necessarily respect the rules. So you're not supposed to be drilling at 7 in the morning or at 10 p.m. at night, but they will. So the AQI obviously is a challenge. Be mindful of the impact on your health at times, on your skin. The water, you know, I'm not a fussy person typically, but I've got a water filter now because, you know, hair loss is real without it. So those, and then you have, you know, it's just challenging because you're a foreigner in another place sometimes. That's all. You get those, you get those days too.
Okay. Well, so one of the few questions I have left is, what is the best thing for you about living in Hanoi then?
Oof, that is such a hard question to answer. I feel, obviously, as you can probably tell, just so lucky to be here. I've met some phenomenal people. What is the best thing is the people in the office that have just welcomed me. You know, made us feel right at home. The people who work in our home that taken me on as their sister and talk about, leaving when we leave, and, crying with them when they've lost a loved one, celebrating when they've had a baby, just getting to know the people, getting to see a different culture and trying to understand them, my colleagues in the office. And I learned so much. I'm a very expressive person, as you can see, and they managed to keep it all within. And I'm always impressed by that. And they're fantastic problem solvers. The best mathematicians you'll find are in Vietnam. So yeah, I love it. And they get you involved. I was dragon boat racing last year. I've been on TV countless times singing an ode to Ho Chi Minh and various random experiences like that. Where else but in Vietnam?
I have some more questions coming in. Asking you about the medical care and about the food, and in particular the street food.
Okay, so the medical care, there's a group called Family Medical Practice that's run by the Israelis, very popular with families, especially with young children, because they do 24/7 care, and they have a pediatrician there that was very good. So people tend to go there, and then there is Raffles Medical, which is where we have chosen to go because it's just not far from us. They're linked with the Raffles Group in Singapore. We find it's a good clinic for what we need. Healthcare is exceptionally expensive here. Please be mindful of that. However, there are some local hospitals that are quite good. I accidentally injured myself. Oh, accident. I injured myself over the summer holidays, and Raffles wasn't open on a Sunday, but I needed to get my stitches checked out. So I went to a local hospital that the office recommended. And oh my goodness, I don't know why we go to international medical facilities anymore. It was very impressive for a fraction of the price, and we got a free meal thrown in as well. So there is, you don't want surgery here, that's for sure. But we can medevac typically to Singapore or to Thailand, to Bangkok.
Why do you say you don't want to do surgery in Hanoi?
Because it is believed that the skill set in terms of surgery isn't as good as it could be. So it's just better to go to, there's better healthcare in Bangkok and in Singapore.
Region.
Yeah. Yeah, and World Bank will support the right cases with that,
And so when you look, the last questions we're winding down, what about food?
Oh, wow.
Food.
I'm
sure the food's fantastic.
It is. It really is. I mean, it's fantastic. It's cheap. It's fresh. It's around every street corner. Like someone said, street food is fine. Pho is the dish for Hanoi, but Ho Chi Minh City has another dish, and so does Hue. So it's all quite regional. The Vietnamese love their own food. Please remember that if you do come to Vietnam, a couple of golden rules. Never, ever disturb anyone during the hours of 12 to 1. That is their lunch break. Do not arrange a meeting between that time. That is their lunch break. And what is very interesting is when I started having lunch with the staff when I first arrived, They used to take me out for lunch. And, you know, typically you get the menu and you look at what you want to eat and that's it. The Vietnamese do not do things like that. They order to share. Everything is shared. A pizza is not just for them, it's for everybody. Salad, we're going to share. Everything is always shared.
Because you actually have a segue into one of my last questions. Actually, my last question, because it's 9:13, is what are one or two of the cultural must-knows if relocating to Hanoi? So I guess you said one, never disturb anybody between 12 and 1. Anything else that could really upset our hosts?
Yes. You know, I read a great book called Culture Map. So if anyone wants to grab that book, if they haven't already, please read it. You'll find that countries and cultures like Vietnam, collectivist society, they're about each other. They're big on community. So certain rules in the office, for example, you don't single anyone out, not even for praise. They don't like, everything is as a group. They have a very group mentality. So to lose your temper in front of people also shows a sign of weakness on your part because you don't know how to control yourself. To praise people, praise the group. You don't praise just one person. And again, if you've got an issue, you take the person to the side and communicate on that side. So that, you know, understanding how they think and how they perceive things is very helpful. Also know that it's family first in everything. So if they've got a funeral to go to, you give them that time to go to that funeral, even if it's the third cousin or their childhood friend's father died. You allow that to happen. And same with weddings, and you know, it's family first.
Okay, so that sort of brings us roughly. So thank you very much, Kopa, for a very comprehensive view. Your enthusiasm and your love for Hanoi. And really, what can I say except what is there not to like?
Yeah, I mean, seriously.
So it's one of those. It's one of those locations, you know. And it was, thank you. It's very comprehensive and makes me miss Hanoi. I've visited a couple of times. Makes me want to go back. Yeah. So if anybody's thinking of relocating to Hanoi, well, that is definitely the location of choice, I would say, because it ticks all the boxes. You've got good schooling. You can work. The housing is reasonable. Cost of living. Lots of fun things to do. Access to other tourist spots. Really, what's there not to like? So with that, on that note, I will ask our president, Sarah, to conclude. And thank you so much, Akofa, for your time and your effort. Sarah, over to you.
Hello, thank you very much, Akofa. It was a brilliant session, and thank you for sharing such important tips in terms of how and when to apply for schools and what pathways to take in terms of getting a work permit. You know, it gives me immense satisfaction that the office is incredibly helpful and resourceful. And I think that's quite a helpful tip for all those who are going to move, thinking of moving as well. And it was a useful tip that learning a language can go a long way, I guess, in Vietnam or anywhere else. It's just a bit of an effort, but it's always helpful when you're moving. You know, that when you mentioned importance given to group, I just thought that I wish the world could adopt that. Because that's an excellent approach. I wasn't aware of it, and it just shows about their culture and the politeness of it. No, thank you very much. Thank you for such a comprehensive session. It was absolutely brilliant. Thank you everyone else for joining, for taking time out to listen to Akofa and what all she had to share. This would be the last session, and we would be resuming our travels very shortly in the next year. So see you all. And of course, we would all like to thank Yvonne. Yvonne, thank you for your time, for always being there and coming up with questions and being so interactive all the time. Thank you very much.
Pleasure. And watch out for season 2. Season 3. Season 3. It's The Crown. Only better.
Absolutely, absolutely. So thank you very much and take care.
Thank
Bye.
you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.